First, though, let's talk about something far more serious. A lot of the conversations we've had about trans issues are really about when ideology meets reality. It's the part of the subtitle of Helen Joyce's book. We spoke to her regularly on this issue because we had a lot of talk, didn't we, in Scotland, ahead of Nicola Sturgeon's demise. We're talking about, trans issues when it related to women's safety, particularly behind bars in prisons. And it was hypothetical that there would ever be rapists and sex abusers who would be behind bars and then would transition using gender self-ID, no doctor involved, and say, oh, no, I'm a woman, and then get moved to a woman's prison. Well, and then, of course, it happened. Isla Bryson, etc., etc. It's not hypothetical, it is real. Well, my next guest is someone who very much lives the reality of trans ideology and the reality of trans self-ID as it exists even now, even before the extra demands that trans activists are making about the ability to go through a legal transition without any doctor involved and anything happening at all to their bodies. She is Kerry Lee Galvin, and she joins us now. Good morning to you, Kerry Lee.
Morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. And before we even start our conversation, I really applaud you for your bravery in speaking out. The first thing that you've done in speaking out, and you've done some interviews, this is your first broadcast interview though, is your decision to waive your anonymity as a victim of most serious, awful child sex abuse. You had a right to be anonymous your whole life, but you've chosen to waive that because you want to speak out and save other people and help other women and other victims, and I salute you for that. So thank you, first of all, for that. Let's talk about what's happened to you, though, because you are the victim of the most horrific abuse by your own father, aren't you? Tell us a little bit about what happened to you and your father going to jail.
So I was abused by my father sexually for as long as I can remember. He was convicted for 9 years of abuse purely because that's the evidence that the police had on him. He not only sexually abused me, but he also traded in explicit images of me and other paedophiles online. And also on top of that, he was an abusive father anyway. He was very neglectful and very violent as well.
And you were one of 8 children, but you were the only one who was targeted. You believe that you were groomed from a very young age, even as a baby. And, he wasn't just abusing you. There were other, we believe other children as well. The evidence on his computer the police found, trading images with other paedophiles. I mean, of the worst crimes ever. Thankfully, identified by the police, thankfully, convicted, sent to prison for rather longer, as is often the case, than he ended up actually serving. Sent to prison for 15 years, served only 7.5 years. And during that time, he made the decision, we understand, to transition to live as a trans woman. And what did that mean for him behind bars?
So it was an awkward timeline of events, really. I was told about an altercation that occurred, which stopped him being eligible for parole. And within the same sentence, I was told that he'd now decided to transition into female. Obviously, as you can appreciate, I found this quite a coincidence because it would mean that he would be segregated from other male prisoners, particularly the people that he had an altercation with. He'd be given much more rights to things. So he was bought a wig, makeup. His deed poll was paid for. So I actually changed my name by deed poll when it first came out, as I felt like that was needed. But it was paid for him.
Now, his name is Clive Bundy. That's where he was born. He was convicted. That's his name. He then started living as a trans woman. We got a picture of him on the screen. He then was released from prison. You were told he was released, and you were told his new identity. He's changed his name to Claire Fox. Now, it's interesting that he chose to change his name to Claire Fox. She is a sort of regular here on TalkTV. She's someone who's spoken out an awful lot about the risks to women of a lot of trans ideology. She's been a very prominent campaigner on that issue. She's in the House of Lords now. Obviously, she's a Brexit campaigner as well. He chose to change his name to Claire Fox. And you were told this but you were amazed to discover that you didn't have a right to know that your father was out of prison and living life under a completely different identity. Tell us about that conversation.
So the victim liaison officer phoned me and told me that the altercation had taken place and that he had now become a woman and had given permission for me to know that information. Now that he has been released, I've obviously asked the question as to whether he's still identifying as Claire Fox, but I've been told, obviously, that it's not my right to know. So at the moment, I still don't know whether he's still going with that identity or whether he's changed again, whether he's gone back to being a male. The conversation I had with my victim liaison officer, you know, it was as if she was telling me what she had for dinner last night. It was like, it was information that didn't really matter. And, you know, it was his way of controlling again, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing you said, he'd been controlling, coercive and abusive, obviously, father. And this was his sort of way of sort of almost putting two fingers up to the system and to you as his victim, that it was his choice whether or not you knew. You had no right to know that he was being released from jail under a different name. And if you say if he changes his name again, you've got no right to know that.
Absolutely no right. The UK government keep telling me and other people in response that it is down to the victim liaison officer, despite me speaking to many different victim liaison officers and them saying that they cannot categorically tell victims any change of name, even if they think it's in their best interest, as they'd be breaking data protection laws.
Because, yes, of course, his right to privacy being such a big concern for all of us in the general public and his victims. And the other issue here is not just you having a right to know as a victim, you know, your own father out of prison. Again, I think most of us would agree far too soon. There is also this issue in terms of his ability to escape effectively the sex offenders register. The point of that is that someone is on that register, they are known to the authorities. If they apply for a job working with children, working with vulnerable people, working in a school, if they want to go and live, you know, opposite a playground or a nursery, you know, that these people go, you can't do that because we've done the searches, we know who you are. But if he's going under the name Claire Fox, then that's not found out. And although he is legally required to say, oh, that's not always been my name. My original name was Clive Bundy. We know that lots of sex offenders don't do that. And extraordinarily, even if there was a proper, was it the Disclosure and Barring Service, the DBS, the replacement of the criminal record check that we used to have, the CRBs, an employer can check the criminal records of someone who applies for a job and basically find out whether they've, you know, have they got previous convictions and have they changed their name? They can find out everything about them. It should all come up because it's about safeguarding. But for trans people, it often doesn't come up, does it? Explain why.
So basically, when you change gender and you change your name with that, you can then obviously apply to change it on your birth certificate, your passport, legal documentation, which then would lead to that being the information and the documents you use for your DBS check, meaning that you could just use that name for your DBS check.
That is such a terrible, awful, you know, legal loophole, isn't it? We're going to take just a 30-second break to give you a little bit of a breather, Kerry Lee. And then I want to talk more about your concerns about this and what could happen as a result of this and why you are concerned that this man is on the streets under an assumed name. We don't know if it's still Claire Fox, as you say. We don't have any right to know this. And whether or not he could actually be gaining access to women with children, to a job where he has access to children. And because of the urge to protect his privacy and the urge not to offend trans people or trans activists, that could be legally possible for him to do. This is TalkTV Breakfast with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. The time is 9:33. Thank you very much indeed for your company. I'm still with Ceri Lee Galvin, who's a victim of abuse by her rapist father, sent behind bars for 15 years after his abuse of her throughout her childhood. Now out of jail a few weeks ago, Kerry Lee, but having changed his name from Clive Bundy to Claire Fox. Who knows if he's changed it again since? We don't have a right to know that, apparently, because of, you know, data protection and his privacy. But crucially, he's living now, we understand, as a trans woman using that identity. And this is your concern, not just for your safety, You have obviously concerns. You don't know where he is, what his name is, but also for the safety of other people. Talk us through that.
So I spent my whole childhood doing what my father wanted, to protect other people. That's what I felt. That's how I justified it in my own brain. I have a younger sister that I was told he would target if I didn't. That was why I did it. Now I sit here and I think about the fact that I can't do that anymore. You know, he could be anywhere, and he could be in public swimming changing rooms. He could be accessing children as a little old lady. You know, it's absolutely crazy how it's worked, that I don't know where he is, but also that other people don't know as well.
Yeah. Well, again, we're constantly told, you know, what's your issue with, you know, a trans woman being in the loos or a changing room, you know, or you know, anywhere else where women and girls can be. Well, this is our issue. Now, you've been accused of transphobia for speaking out on this. I do find it extraordinary that the victim of abuse like this could ever be called names like this online. But yeah, that's the world we live in. Are you crazy question? Are you transphobic, Kerry Lee, for speaking out?
Absolutely not. And to be honest, throughout the whole process of waiving my anonymity, this was what I feared the most, was being considered as transphobic. I'm somebody who believes that if you are doing something that does not hurt anybody else, then you have every right to do that. You live your life how you want. But these people are hurting other people, and they're hurting children. They're taking away childhoods, and they're not caring. I was told that in the parole board summary as to why they released him, that he admits to finding children sexually attractive. He admits to thinking he could have sex as and when he wanted it. And he admits to having no consideration at all for the fact that he was abusing children. And I'm supposed to believe now that he's not at risk, and that he can just access these places as you know, a little old dear.
Yeah.
And he is.
I mean, that's the extraordinary thing, isn't it? That we know Lucy Allen, your local MP, she spoke up in Parliament. The only reason we're allowed to say his name, Claire Fox, because we are reporting something that was said in Parliament, and she has that legal privilege in Parliament, and she can't be prosecuted for breaching that you know, dead naming him. That's awful phrase, dead naming somebody who is a man and is living a trans woman. We believe completely fakely. But this is the extraordinary thing. A lot of people say, why is he even on the streets? Why has the parole board released him when he's clearly a danger to children?
He's absolutely a danger to children, and this is the main reason I chose to waive my right to anonymity. I know this man, and I know full well what he's capable of, because I endured it for many, many years. Yeah. I waived my right so that I can sit here and argue with people. I'm not a case story. This isn't a story. It's a reality, and it's happening everywhere.
Yeah. You're not a hypothetical, you're a reality. I mean, it's wonderful. You're 24 years old now. You a student, you want to be a paramedic, you've got a partner, you've got a young son, and it's incredible that you have made that amazing life for yourself, given how you started out in life and what you've had to go through. But you've got a message for the government, haven't you? You've got a message for all those who, you know, want to be right on and be nice people and trans allies. You're not transphobic, but you understand that the reality of when sex abusers, when people like your father are able to use the law that was meant to help trans people with gender dysphoria to have a happier life, that law is being used right now. And they want to extend that law, many, you know, SNP, Labour and others, to make it even easier to be abused, to actually gain access to victims, to women, to girls, to children. Tell us what you want the government to do, what you want the Prime Minister to do, what you want Keir Starmer to do if he's in office.
The way that I see it is that he has always exploited vulnerable people, myself being one of them. This is just another way to do it. He's going to continue to do this, and so many others like him will as well. There needs to be tougher restrictions on deed polls. I believe if you have a criminal record and a serious criminal record, that needs to flag up if you're changing your name. We should not be relying on these people to be honest and truthful, because that's one thing we know they're not. And also this loophole where they're not being tied to their past, that needs to be just sorted. And I think that's common sense, to be honest, really.
Absolutely. A lot of this is common sense to most of us, and I think we're all just absolutely flabbergasted that it doesn't appear to be common sense to many of our politicians. Ceri-Lee Galvin, you are an incredibly brave and impressive, courageous young woman, and I hope you can, on some level, put this behind you and move forward. But to waive your anonymity for life, to speak out, to try and prevent this man and any other man using this law to gain access to other victims is incredibly brave of you. And I know my audience and everyone here at TalkTV, we got nothing but, you know, well, just want to salute you, got nothing but praise for what you've done. Thank you so much for speaking out. It's such a powerful voice. And I'm going to make sure that every single MP who's got a say over this sees that video and understands what you've got to say. Kerry Lee Galvin, thank you for talking to us.